Maid outfits are so cute. I've seen a lot of good fits. Here's Rama Duwaji, who you might recognize. That's a good fit right there. Love a nice OCBD. That's cute as hell. The classic twirl and drop. I have to practice this. Do you have like a classic maid outfit? Femboy self-report? What the fuck are you talking about? You don't have to be a femboy to wear a maid outfit? I mean, it is true. They do make like male maid outfits. That is a thing that exists, yeah. Are they cute though? Maid outfit men's? Yeah, you're just going to get fetish bullshit from Shein if you look that up. I don't know what I expected, really. Vintage? Yeah, this all looks like shit. They do exist, though. Historical? No, yeah, it's all costumes. It's all fetish play for men. Disgusting. Very bad. I think it's called a butler. Well, a butler and a maid are two different things. That shirt isn't seersucker, is it? No, it's not. Just a heavy woven fabric. It's sashiko woven. That's why it looks like that. See? These are all different thickness and colors of threads. I have not read Kagurabachi. Why is men dressing femme always a fetish for others? I mean, you know why, right? It definitely doesn't help that, like, femboy is a porn term, and when guys do dress femininely, it's almost always so they can cosplay as fucking sissies or CDs on Grindr. A male maid is a valet de chambre. 14th century? Okay, this is an old-ass term. All right, I don't know. How are you enjoying The King in Yellow? I enjoyed it. A male servant might be a footman. I mean, you could just have a male maid wearing a maid outfit that's tailored to masculine proportions. You know? Like, you can do that. That's possible. Maid means female? Yeah, etymologically, sure. But, like, every profession used to have man in it. You know, like fireman. Maid, male. Fire maid? That's... That job description got me bricked up. I don't know what the fuck a fire maid is, but I do want to see a girl dressed like that. Yeah, I'm not seeing any good references here, I'm sorry. The problem is that whenever I see guys wearing maid outfits, they're wearing women's maid outfits, which is not how a guy would dress. A maid outfit is from antiquity. It's from an older period of time when men and women dress differently. If you had a man in a maid outfit, they would be wearing a different outfit. It would not be the same. It would take the same classical tailoring principles used in menswear at the time and apply it to the aesthetics of a maid outfit. A male maid is a butler? No, those are different things. So a butler? Oh my God, no! Butlers manage the house. Maids clean. A butler is high up in the hierarchy of servants at an estate. A maid isn't. The maid is a servile position. A butler handles communication. They butler. They do buttling. They're totally different jobs. They buttle. I'm trying to find like a single good reference, like a drawing or something. A drawing of a guy in a maid outfit to like point out maybe a steward or a cleaner. I don't know why we're not looking for new terminology. What I'm talking about is a masculinization of the maid outfit. You take the same basic aesthetic principles of the outfit, but you apply them to the way male silhouettes were built around for clothing at the time. Like, here's a guy in a maid outfit. And he looks, you know, fine, but it's clearly a woman's outfit. You could make a men's outfit that is a maid outfit. Housekeeper? What? I genuinely am going to start banning you people. Why are you talking about the terminology? Why do you... What the fuck do you think using the term valet changes? I'm talking about the tailoring. Search terms? None of these are helpful. You don't know what you're talking about. So pants instead of a skirt? Well, depending on how far back you go, men wore skirts too. There's nothing like what you were describing that existed. I know that. That's why I'm talking about a maid outfit. Maid outfits were for women. They made these outfits for women. But if you're going to dress a man in a maid outfit, okay, a maid outfit like this is referencing historical archetypes for clothing and proportions. This is not a contemporary outfit. It's an old outfit. So if you were going to make a men's made uniform, a made uniform as though it were made for a man, you would make it with those same underlying aesthetic principles, but you would masculinize them. That's the point. I've never seen this before, so I don't know what you're talking about. That's okay. Damn, that sucks for you, horror vacui. You're looking for what historic male domestic servants wore now? No! Because those weren't maid outfits. Because men didn't wear maid outfits. Right now, if you're a guy and you want to dress up in a maid outfit, your only option, apart from like disgusting fetish gear, is to just wear a women's maid outfit, which is not built around the proportions of most men. Men physically are, I'm sorry, I hate to break with the veil of wokeness, but by and large, on averages, men and women look different. If you're a man and you're wearing women's clothing, it will look like you're wearing women's clothing, because the women's clothing usually is built to proportion of women. Especially since this would have been 19th century women, they're probably a lot more trim than the average person, a much more distinct hourglass that they could build around structurally. Like this structured skirt strip for men. I don't know anything about this person, but I do like that fit. That looks good. The servant hierarchy. Butler and housekeeper together here. And then under the butler, coachman, first footman, second footman, hall boy. And then under the housekeeper, head housemaid, laundry maid, and then you have the kitchen workers. Actually, this is useful. This is useful. Yes. But they do different jobs. The women clean and work in the kitchen, except for the chef who's a man. Whereas the men have the front-facing roles. Coachman drives the coach. Butler buttles, as we've described. Footman, hall boy. Well, the hall boy, see, the hall boy is pretty much the closest thing we have. Hold on. Hall boy, servant. A position held by a young male domestic worker on the staff of a great house, usually a young teenager. So I think this is the guy who you approach with a penny, with like a pence, and you're like, I say, boy, will you go down and get me a paper? And he'll go, oh, boy, for a pence. A whole pence. Oh, on my mother and her memory, I won't forget this. Thank you, sir. And then they like run out really fast to get it, you know? I think that's the hall boy's job or something. Boy, what day is it? Yeah, exactly. Like his female counterpart, the scullery maid, the hall boy would have been expected to work up to 16 hours a day, 7 days per week. Man, life used to suck. Emptying chamber pots for the higher-ranking servants. In the absence of a boot boy, he cleaned the boots of not just family members, but also those of the butler and those of the visitors. Man life did suck. Man life sucked? Buddy, you know what they were putting the damn housemaids through? Similar, but with sexual assault? No, they were sexually assaulting the young boys too, I promise. It's interesting, though. I want to find like a higher res version of this image. If you were to design a male maid outfit, well, one thing's for sure, they would be wearing an apron. That's something the male line of servants don't have. They don't have aprons, except for the hall boy, which I'm now blocking with my camera. But you would have aprons for nurses, housemaids, and so on because they're doing cleaning work. Everyone who worked in the kitchen would have an apron. I mean, for the chef, the whole chef's jacket basically works as the apron. What about a classical waiter's outfit? No, because waiters don't clean. A male maid outfit would have an apron. It would be loose and flowing, unlike the structured outfits of the coachman and the footman, because their jobs are different. A housemaid, like a maid's job, you need to move very flexibly because you're literally like maneuvering around all of the incredibly intricate architecture and interior design of a house in order to clean everything. A coachman literally just sits at the head of a coach. A butler buttles, as we've established. You can tell from the footmen in this image right here that their job does not involve a lot of like careful maneuvering. Look at them. They're wearing riding boots and a jacket. They're not indoors. They're outside. The women are inside. So the women have loose flowing outfits with aprons. So if you were going to make a maid outfit for a man, it would be similar to that of the housemaid or the laundry maid. I guess they have pretty similar outfits, really. What's an undernurse? They work in service of the nurse. So hall boy's what you're looking for? No, because the hall boy isn't a maid. I don't. A male maid outfit would be an outfit like it would be if you didn't have gender disparities. If you went back in time to like 1880 and you deleted the concept of like gender roles from the brains of the like Victorian aristocracy, and you then had a bunch of house servants and you had a maid and it was a male maid, what outfit would they make for that male maid in the maid hierarchy under the housekeeper? What outfit would they make that would be an exact peer of the outfit of the housemaid, built in accordance with the tailoring principles of the time, a maid outfit for a male? It would be similar but structurally different. Like this? No, a maid would never ever wear this tight of a vest. This is fetish gear, and it looks disgusting. Look at that skirt apron. What are you going to use to clean with this? Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Do you imagine would have a skirt? Absolutely. Skirts are objectively the most comfortable and easy thing to move around before knitwear was invented. Oh, sorry, not knitwear was invented. Knitwear had been a thing for a billion years. Before modern like knitted pants, like sweatpants were invented. If you want to move around freely and do a bunch of dusting or whatever, and you're indoors, so it doesn't matter if your clothing is loose and flowing because it's not like it's outside. You're not going to get mud on it or whatever. It would be a skirt. You'd have a skirt, a shirtwaist of some kind, and an apron. Maybe like 1950s style shop uniform? No, they didn't have skirts. They just wore an apron over their pants and shirt. Pleated skirt but shorter. You're just linking men and skirts. This is nothing like what a maid outfit from the time would look like. It bears no relevance whatsoever. But like worn by a man? Nope, this has a jacket. You think you could move around that freely when we're... it's okay. You're engaging in good faith. This is a tough ask. The uniform would look almost identical to that of the housemaid. It would just be structured to masculine proportions. Buddy, I doubt men would be allowed to wear a shirt. I assume you mean skirt, but you didn't hear my prompt earlier. A male would never be allowed to be a maid. You wouldn't have a maid indoors in Victorian England. You wouldn't do that. We're already breaking with gender roles here. A male maid is already breaking with gender roles. That's the point. If you are a man and you're wearing a maid, if you're wearing a maid outfit as a man, you're already deliberately subverting expectation. Valet de chambre 1818 with an apron doing clothing shit. Somebody with an outfit like this would never be asked to clean a house. They would not. This person's a tailor. This person would never... Can you imagine? Like, imagine cleaning a house while wearing this. A vest and a jacket? Why are you looking for something that you said doesn't exist? I'm not! People keep linking me stuff! I know it doesn't exist! It doesn't exist! Men weren't maids! But you could make a maid uniform for a man today. Found one? I can't tell if you're trolling. Please say psych. Lilam Jazifa. Not trolling? Okay. This is a fetish outfit. It's just a woman's maid uniform made poorly. And with plastic. Like, this is just a man wearing a woman's maid uniform made in China. Also, it doesn't fit. Also, it looks like shit. That's as close as we're going to get. It doesn't have to be. That doesn't fit? This? No. No, there's 1,000 technical problems with... Do you know how good clothing used to look? Look, here's a photo of some maids from the 1890s. See how roomy and flowing their clothing is? Their job is to go around a gigantic house filled with gold, finery, china, silverware, and clean everything. They have to reach up and down and over and around with an incredible degree of care and precision. It's a job. It is a kind of work, and they had clothing built to do that kind of work. That's the point. The clothing, it is workwear. It is definitionally workwear. It was built to accomplish a specific goal. That's why it looked like that. It's not just any guy from that period in time. It's not like any Victorian men's outfit. Obviously, there are elements here that are stylistic, like the frills are aesthetic. I don't think they're serving a work outfit, because they also had an ornamental role in the house. But that is the reason why they dressed that way. Somebody dressed like this could not clean, nor would I let them in my house, nor would I let them near my children. A lot of these look quite nice. This is very ornamental. I have to assume this would have been a servant of a wealthier family. Would the hyper-ideal male maid just wear that outfit? Sure, if they wanted to wear a woman's maid outfit. But if it was a male maid outfit, it would look different. The fit wouldn't work on a man? No, and they wouldn't consider it either. Explain how it would look differently, please? Sure. This is a mix of a practical desire to construct a uniform that allows you to clean a whole house, but also the aesthetic preferences and sensibilities of, in many cases, Victorian Englanders for women at the time. So you would need a workwear outfit that is exactly as flexible, breathable, free-flowing, and so on as this, but also done in a way that is built to the aesthetic preferences of how male servants would want to look ornamentally at that time. What's one detail that'd be more masculine? I mean, look at all this lace. A men's maid outfit would probably not have. Men didn't wear. Well, men wore some lace, like in the frills of their collar. Well, it wouldn't look like this. But I'm not really an expert on, like, Regency clothing or Victorian England. 19th century still had some male fashion with lace? Yeah, no, it wasn't totally absent, which is why I stopped talking there. What are we looking for? I literally, at no point, asked any of you. I wanted to talk about it as an abstract thing, as a project, as a concept. Chat was the one that took it upon themselves to provide me a bunch of arguments or examples to argue with. The only one I found was AI, but it's definitely the closest to what you're talking about. So the problem with this one, so there are a couple of problems here. A few problems here. First of all, obviously, these sleeves are nowhere near roomy enough, and they wouldn't be wearing a vest like this, and this is a modern shirt, not an old-timey one, and also this apron is much too restrictive for what they were doing. But also, it's ugly. One of the big things that defines the beauty and appreciation for maid outfits is that they were made beautiful because they're an ornamental feature of a real position in wealthy households. You know what I mean? Like, they were meant to look nice because you had these women running about the house all day, and you were rich as fuck, so you could pay for them to have a nice outfit. Here, I gotta... Okay, but we're not allowed frills at the same time? Well, it depends on the kinds of frills. Also, like, you can have beautiful outfits without frills. Let me just close all this, because I have way too many fucking tabs open. Would the outfit accentuate the man's shoulders? Actually, I think in the 19th century, tailored outfits didn't really accentuate the shoulders quite as much. Those big, dramatic, padded shoulders weren't... Hold on. Photos, male servants, 18... Now, let's just say Victorian England, because that's where we're pulling a lot of this from anyway. Yeah, they had narrower shoulders and kind of like a big tailcoat. That's a feature you'd probably see in a male maid outfit, a tailcoat of some kind. Maybe a waistcoat? Here's a male domestic servant from the time that's getting a little bit closer to what we're talking about here. You have big, roomy, flowy sleeves. You have all this, which is largely ornamental, but then you have, like, essentially a skirted apron. I think this is the closest that we've looked at so far to, like, a male maid outfit. Though I still think that this presentation right here with, like, the waistcoat and the tie indicates a degree of professional formality that would not be expected of or even wanted in a maid, if that makes any sense. The reason being that a maid isn't expected to interact with guests. Classical waiter outfit? Well, okay, a waiter and a shoe shiner and all of these service positions that you're thinking of, they interact with guests. So there's a level of professional presentation there that you don't have with maids. In an old household, maids literally don't interact with guests. All these kitchen maids, housemaids, laundry maids, they are ornamental. They do not interact with the people entering the house. If you have a guest over, they are like a silent service. Whereas a lot of the male roles over here on the right, you are expected to some extent to interact directly, to speak, to be confident, to be an arbiter of some kind. That's the reason why the butler's role is so important. They make decisions. Maids do not make decisions. Maids keep shit clean. They're not meant to talk. That's kind of part of the appeal of a maid outfit, and it's the reason why they're so fetishized, because it's a highly servile outfit. This waistcoat right here doesn't indicate the same degree of servility. This kind of tailoring speaks more towards business. This isn't just a servant. This is a businessman. This is a man who would speak to you about a product. Does that make sense? If you saw a guy who looked like this, he would not be, silently shuffling around the halls, doing work, but never even making eye contact with the guest. He would be like, yep, this is my I'm a barber. I'm going to talk to you about the job I'm doing for you. I'm a butcher. This is my thingamajig. Like he would present himself. There is a tension being drawn here, but not to the maid, not to the humble maid. You see how this is interesting, right? This is the reason why I was talking earlier about this, because it's an interesting project. The maid outfit is a byproduct of a very specific set of social expectations that there isn't really, at least in history, a male equivalent for, which is why it's interesting to imagine how that stuff might translate in a different set of contexts. You can get close with like a bartender's uniform, like an old-timey one, but bartenders interacted with the guests. They had a front-facing role. It's just interesting. I find it interesting. The Downton Abbey Hall boys. These are hall boys, like we see in the hierarchy here from Downton Abbey. Yes, so we're seeing some similar patterns here, right? You have the waistcoat, big baggy sleeves, and a skirted apron. Okay, so you're seeing similarities. But there is still a difference there, isn't there? You know what one big difference is? A big one? These hall boys might grow into butlers, but these maids stay maids. The highest rank these ladies could reach would be the head housemaid, right? Or the housemaster, which means that the highest role that they would eventually reach would still be one where they are invisible in the background. At least in the context of, like, guests in the house. The white parts of their outfits also suggest their labor. Yes, because you bleach. That's the reason why, by the way, they wore white on the parts that you would expect to get dirty, because you can just throw the linens in and bleach them and make them white again. You can get them any amount of dirty, and you can always re-dye them, or undye them, essentially, back to white. That's the reason why, historically, people who worked, like, in jobs that got you grimy, you could just do that. You could endlessly re-whiten and re-starch them. The housekeeper was a really important position, though? That's true, yeah. But you can tell, right? The housekeeper isn't cleaning. That's why she's wearing black. All of the women working in the kitchen and as housemaids, they're all white. What does starching an outfit accomplish for the garment? Well, to an extent, it waterproofs it, and it makes it more durable, but largely it's just for structure and aesthetic purposes. Though people did used to starch their clothing for waterproofing quite often. In this case, though, I don't think you wouldn't be starching your average, like, apron. You wouldn't starch an apron. You want it to be waterproof. You don't want to get, like, a mess in your apron and it just bounces off and hits the ground that you now have to clean. You would want the apron to absorb the mess. Something like this. Yeah, this is closer, though you would have a longer skirt. Or you would have a skirt. I think he's just wearing black trousers here. Something like this. Hey, this is a nice contemporary costume. I think this looks quite good. Anything made at that time would be much more ornamental and interesting to look at than this. This is a very simple apron that no maid would wear. Even the Downton Abbey the actresses here are wearing more interestingly constructed outfit. Well, she's not wearing an apron. She is, but not her. Whatever. More interestingly constructed than this. Like this big baggy fold of fabric right here. You would need a tie or a string or something. But I like this. I like this. Yeah. I also I like how the outfit presents a level of formality, but not in a authoritative sense. Like there are certain kinds of formal wear that convey ornamentation and certain ones that convey authority. Like none of these people here look authoritative, right? Like if you entered a house in the 1880s and saw people looking like this, you would instantly know they're the help. You would know their service staff. Though, I guess looking at this, and I could be wrong because I haven't seen Downton Abbey, but I would guess this woman is the highest ranking here. Partly because she's in the middle, but also she's older than the others, and she's wearing black, not white. Am I wrong on that? Has anyone watched Downton Abbey? Am I correct in my, well, I don't know. It's interesting, though. She looks the strictest? Yeah, she does look the strictest. Hold on. Victorian England housekeeper outfit servant. Here are 2 male servants from 1904. Why are you linking me my own subreddit? Well, servant doesn't necessarily... Again, like, servant doesn't mean maid. Many men have been servants. That doesn't make them a maid. Like, this is very clearly a shop apron, not a maid's apron. Totally different thing. Also, look at this. He's wearing tailored trousers and Oxfords. This guy's wearing, I assume, cuffed jeans. Totally different. Totally different. Maybe the male maid would actually wear pants, but white baggy pants? You mean like big linen pants? Maybe, but I just feel like that's like a totally different type of outfit at that point, you know? I mean, maybe they would wear it under the skirt. Unfortunately, when you look up housekeeper outfits, you also see a lot of maid outfits because Google doesn't distinguish between them. I'd have to go looking into like actual historical sources to see the differences because Google's not going to help me out here. Pants under the apron? Well, it would be a skirt-like apron, certainly. Male parlor maid from 1912? Well, this to me he's just wearing a woman's maid outfit here. I mean I think you're correct in the sense that this is a maid's outfit, but it looks to me like he's just wearing a woman's maid outfit. And in my opinion, it doesn't look that good. And I think that's just because it's like you're looking at an antiquated outfit, and there are just some aesthetic principles that you would expect that aren't present. That's a woman? Well, I'm just engaging with what the person linked. You sure that's a dude? No, I'm not. I'm looking at a link. Molly, fairly well-known picture of a male prostitute that worked in a brothel in London. Well, there you go. Looking for more old images of domestic servants. It's pretty difficult to find good resources on this. Vintage domestic servants outfits drawings. It'd probably be easier to find drawn examples from the time than actual photographs, because if you're using photographs, you're pretty much limited to sources from the late 19th century onwards. This looks quite nice. Strunk. Being a maid was a demanding job. What are these sourced from? Morning, right, afternoon, left. Morning, noon, morning, right, afternoon, left. I wonder what that implies. Maybe you wear the more ornamental outfit earlier in the day because there's less cleaning work to do, because everything's cleaned the night before. So earlier in the morning, there's less to clean. So you would wear the outfit that's a little bit less practical, but later in the day, there's more to clean, so you would wear like the full apron dress, and you wouldn't wear black. No, it's color specific, darker in the evening. No, it's the opposite. Morning right, afternoon left. Maybe the maid would be more presentative in the morning, but later on they'd be more like working. I don't know, just interesting to think about. Why is it labeled that way? What was life like as a 19th century servant? At 6 a.m., the scullery man opens up the kitchen, cleans and lights the fires, fills the coal buckets, and prepares the spit and dripping pan. He cleans the kitchen, the chef's private room, pantry, and larders, and scours the dressers, tables, and cutting boards. At least twice a week, he will scrub the floor with sand. The kitchen maid also rises at the same time, helps with the cleaning, lays out ingredients and utensils needed for the day ahead, then sets to work cooking the servants' breakfasts. At 6:30, the footman, see, look, we're learning the lore. We're learning the lore. The footman opens the shutters in the main rooms and takes coals to the house's sitting rooms. He brushes and sponges his own and his master's clothes as needed, cleans boots and knives as well as the butler's pantries, trims the household lamps, cleans and fills them, changes into a clean apron, and lays the family breakfast table and sideboard. A junior housemaid reports to the housekeeper's room, and as her housemaid's box checks for supplies, sets to work, she draws back and shakes the curtain in the drawing room, cleans the fireplaces. This is an arduous task. Light the fire, fill the hearthstone. At least twice a week, she hand brushes the carpet, then turns over the edges and sweeps the wooden floor. Important to check for valuable items like earrings, which may have been dropped. Shuts the room for 15 minutes while the dust settles and repeats this in the music and sitting rooms. Rub the furniture. At 8 a.m., the chef enters the kitchen for a minor domestic ritual, checking the cleanliness of the hands, hair, and uniforms of the kitchen and scullery staff, checks the fire and utensils. After eating his own breakfast in the servants' hall, the footman calls each single gentleman into the house and knocks and enters their room, opening the curtains and collecting any clothes from the night before. The kitchen maid sends breakfast to the servants' hall and steward's room where all the senior staff, including the chef, eat their meals. The remaining kitchen staff eat in the kitchen while the scullery man washes the breakfast dishes. After her morning tasks are complete, the junior housemaid washes her hands and changes from a heavy gray working apron into a clean white one. She collects a calling tray from the still room and calls family members and visitors, excepting any single gentleman. Right, you would not have maids interact with single gentlemen. She then takes hot water to each bedroom washstand before eating her own breakfast. Kitchen maid cooks and sends her family breakfasts, while the scullery maid washes up the pans, dishes, and china, but not the glasses and silver, which are washed solely by the footman. Huh. So the scullery man only handles the heavier, bulkier stuff, but the footmen wash the glasses and silver. Chef checks produce from the estate, garden, and farm, checks with the gardener and butcher. Don't want any thievery? Yes. The junior housemaid can't trust a woman? No, they were all men. The scullery man and the footmen are all men. While the family and any guests are at breakfast, the junior housemaid goes to each of the main bedrooms and opens the window, throwing bedclothes over the edge of the bed to the air, emptying hot water bottles or any slops out the washstand and chamber pot. Scullery maids can sometimes be women? Huh, okay. I thought scullery was only the... Oh, no, yeah, never mind. Scullery maid is a woman. Yeah, I'm wrong. During this time, the footman would have two usual duties. Either he would stand in the entrance hall and answer the front door, or he would attend the family lunchroom. See, this is the thing. The footmen interact with the house in an authoritative way, right? Like they're like front servants. You would talk to them directly. I'm pretty sure that if you were in a Victorian house, you would never like talk to the maids ever. Like if you were a master of the house, you might talk to a footman because he'd be in the foyer, and you might be like, "Oi, hey boy, do this," or something. But you would never talk to a maid. You would talk to the housekeeper, and the housekeeper would talk to the maid. Not unless you're a gossip. Yeah. You might talk to a maid in practice, but yes. I think that if you were in a house of the time and you talked to a maid as the master, she would be fucking terrified. I don't mean like, oh, you're gonna hit or rape me. I mean that like, she's like a little bug scurrying around, and you're like, hey, and she's like, fuck, you know, like Yeah, it would be a breach of decorum. Whereas like the first footman would expect you to look him in the eye and go like, do that or something. All of this, by the way, is the reason why maid outfits have become the cultural fixation that they are. Because it's an outfit that's meant to be very beautiful, but also denotes an extreme level of class distinction. It's an incredibly servile position, but it's still very beautiful and ornamental. That's why people like them. It's interesting. There's a lot of interest built into it, you know? A maid's role was seen but not heard, while the footmen or the employees that walk around and ask, "Can I help you find it?" Yeah, I think it's like a simple version of that. But yeah, I think that I think that's to an extent true. As a general rule. Kitchen staff have a few minutes rest in the kitchen. The chef starts preparing and cooking the family dinner. Scullery man washes up, including the dripping pan and the spit. It's so refreshing to hear you talk about it in a non-horny way, really new. I'm not really horny about maid outfits. I think they look really nice. I think fetishized maid outfits, like the little French skirts, like the short skirts or whatever, look disgusting. Because it's like a, like, porn version of an outfit. It's just aesthetically empty. If you're going to fetishize a maid outfit, you should be fetishizing an actual maid outfit, in my opinion. Otherwise, what's the oh, wow, you fetishized an outfit with, like, cleavage and a short skirt. How impressive. Whoa, dog, you're such a beast. You're such a demon. You get horny to a sexualized French maid outfit where the corset pushes the tits up and you can see midway up the thigh. That's crazy, dog. You're like a freak. After his tea, the footman lights lamps, closes shutters, and draws curtains in the sitting room. He assists the butler in laying the family dinner table. In keeping with tradition, the first footman carries the silver, the second the china, while the butler places the silver in glasses. If guests are expected, one footman stands on hall duty. Because you would interact with a footman. Yeah. All the kitchen staff are needed to help send up the family dinner. The scullery man washes up again, and then the kitchen maid and scullery man clean the kitchen, sort out the dirty linen. At 8 o'clock, the footman sounds a gong or bell for dinner 15 minutes before it is served, and once again the food is sent up. Carries the dinner from the kitchen, waits the dinner table. Afterwards, he returns plates to the kitchen, removing the cloth, dusts the table, and puts out the lights. He then prepares and assists in serving tea and coffee in the drawing room or dining room before washing the silver and glass used at dinner. Junior housemaid waits a few minutes after the bell, then goes to the ground floor rooms and tidies as before. During family dinner, she goes into now empty upstairs and turns down the beds, checks the fires, and washes stands in water and empties slops. That's poops. The poops. The kitchen maid prepares and serves the servants' supper, after which the kitchen staff have their own supper. End of a long day. The footman serves the family supper, if required, and hands bedroom candlesticks to each member of the family as he or she wishes to retire. He assists the butler in shutting up the house and locking doors, while the kitchen maid checks the fires are safe and shuts up the kitchen. The junior housemaid takes up hot water bottles to the family and guest bedrooms, and finally goes to bed. Damn. How you find this interesting is incomprehensible to me, but to each their own. I mean, it's like reading a book, right? Learning about the lives of people, and like, it's like this life is incomprehensible to me, you know? But that's why it's interesting. I mean, I would also be interested in reading a similar read-up on like how a Chinese rice farmer from 500 BE would have lived, you know? Well, maybe not as much so, because the regimentation of the schedule is the interesting thing here, in addition to the different life, you know? But like, what about okay, wouldn't you be interested in reading the schedule of like a Chinese imperial minister from the 2nd century or something? Like a guy whose job it is to do all the stupid bullshit the emperor says you have to do or you get beheaded? That'd be kind of cool, right? Like reading about his schedule. At 6 a.m. you do, you know, you get up and you like write out the legal writs of permission or what. I don't know. I feel like it'd be interesting. All right, let's read donos. We've been on it for a while, but I do not regret this departure. I think it's been very interesting. I think you should always try to learn as much as you can about the world. We started talking about clothing, and I maintain my interest in the subject, of course, but I also just think it's interesting to imagine, you know, it's just interesting. What an interesting image, huh? I think it's interesting that the lady's maid is dressed more fashionably with no apron and is in all black because she's not expected to clean. She's just expected to follow around the young mistress and take care of her needs, like doing her hair and, you know, lacing her dress and stuff like that. If you think about it, like, it makes it like the lady's maid wouldn't clean. She would like attend to the, Yeah, like as a personal assistant, so she wouldn't need to wear white. You're welcome for finding that page and image, by the way. Okay. Isn't the reward the good segment? Hmm? No wonder elites used to be fashionable. They had literal private fashion advisors. You know, as recently as the 1950s, you could go into the Macy's men's department and find a guy who worked there who had been working in tailoring for like 40 years, and he would give you advice on how to dress. We used to still have that. Only now are we subjected to the infinite enshittification of all things, where you enter a Macy's and every employee is a, pimple-faced 21-year-old paying off an unpayable college debt, and nobody knows anything about anything. You used to have experts everywhere who could help you. Your butler was an expert. Your shoe shine was an expert. Your cobbler, your tailor, your clothing salesman, just your salesman, like a salesperson, the regular ass sales guy, all experts. Now everyone and everything sucks and is stupid. Not for billionaires, they still have all this and more. Actually, no. Modern day billionaires do not. Part of that is because they don't stay in one place. They don't have one residence, so there's no point in it. But also, this kind of regimentation also demands discipline from the wealthy person. The under-discussed element here is that as busy as the days of the servants are, the old aristocracy did also have very busy days. Not saying their lives were as hard. They weren't. Definitely not. But an aristocrat was by no means an easy job. There was a whole lot of social expectation that came with it that demanded of you a lot of discipline. That segment lasted 10 minutes in Vaush's mind. It had everything for me. It was about fashion. I got to yell at chat for a while. I got to be hyperbolic, but we actually ended up learning a lot of interesting stuff. Okay, I found it interesting. Chat, think of a suit tailored for a woman. It's the reverse. That's a good way of thinking about it, actually. There's a reason why historically women didn't wear suits. Well, there's a lot of reasons, but a big part of it is that the way suits are structured doesn't work, really, if you have breasts. Like, a woman's breast size is largely independent from other elements of their proportionality, whereas the proportions of a men's torso are usually pretty predictable. Chest, shoulder, waist all tend to grow in proportion, and the only real outlying variable is how fat you are, which is a single variable that can be adjusted for. But breasts are soft and can be basically any size, meaning it's really difficult to build a structured, tailored jacket that accommodates women. It's very, very tough. You would need a personal tailor. Off the rack is basically impossible. That's the reason why, when you see women wearing suits, they wear oversized cropped jackets. Like, you've seen how women wear suits, right? They wear suits differently than men wear suits. Usually their suit jackets are structured to accommodate more variance in the chest size. They're meant to be larger and less form-fitting, usually still cinched at the waist. He's been at this for an hour, guys. Will you stop complaining? It's worth pointing out that these early equivalents of women's suits were only really possible for wealthy women who had specific tailoring. A woman with breasts of this size could never, in the modern day, go out and get an outfit that fits them this nicely. It would not be possible. If you were, I'm assuming this woman's large-breasted, it certainly looks like she is, you could not go out and get a jacket that fits you this perfectly unless it was specifically made for you, and that shit would be expensive. Which is why you can have off-the-rack tailoring for men, but not for women. Now that's just the clothes. You can tell that it's not, because this would have been woven. This isn't knitwear. Like, this jacket is structured. Here's a riding jacket being worn by a woman. This degree of precision in the tailoring, you would need to have it tailored for you. It would be very expensive. Likewise with this. This is the reason why servants' clothing of the time would have had pulls and cinches, because it's not meant to be specifically tailored towards your proportions. But then if you take a look at the tight-fitting clothing of wealthy people at the time, it did not have that same, like, if you look at, this, it's a big, roomy outfit that you pull tight with cinches, right? But the real wealthy people don't need cinches. They just have the clothing perfectly constructed to the shape of their body. Men and women. Look at the jacket the woman's wearing right here. Look at that. Can you imagine having enough money in like the 1850s or whatever to get like a talented tailor to work around your proportions like this? Where are her organs? Okay, well, slightly exaggerated for the drawing, but they did wear corsets back then. Look at that. How expensive would it be in today's money? To access this level of talent and this amount of time spent, it would be in the high thousands or low tens of thousands of dollars. The reason it was possible back then is A, these people were very wealthy, B, they placed a higher social importance on this clothing, and C, labor in general was much, much less expensive. Oh, and D, there were just more tailors back then. More people knew how to make an outfit like this. But if you were wealthy, paying the equivalent of $10,000 for an outfit like this wasn't really a big deal. Not just because you were wealthy, but like, that's like one of your two fucking outfits, man. You know what I mean? A lot of you, if you saved up for a while, could probably save up $10,000. Now, obviously, back in the day, the average proletarian didn't have the ability to save up that amount of money and never would. And if they did, it would just get stolen from them, you know? But it is possible to have this degree of excellence in your tailoring, even off a middle-class lifestyle, assuming an availability of that talent. Unfortunately, almost nobody today is capable of producing work this good. Like, you could go to some of the highest quality tailoring houses on Savile Row, you could go to London, you could go to New York, you would struggle to find tailors capable of producing outfits this beautiful and well-structured. Also, obviously, it's not the fashion of current times. Like, so that's also part of it, but like, even if it was the fashion of current times, you would not be able to find people this talented. Don't know about beautiful but well-structured, sure. I think these outfits are beautiful. I mean, I don't know how I'd feel if I saw a person wearing them today. I'd go like, oh, that's nice historical cosplay or whatever. But I mean, I feel like some of these riding outfits for women are clearly, I mean, I think they're very pretty. It's not really like an appreciation necessarily for the aesthetic of the time so much as it is an era where people put a lot more thought and effort into how they presented themselves, I think. Also, like, I don't want to hear it from you guys. You would get one shot by a woman dressed like this if you were like alone in a field where no one could judge you. Like, if you're wearing your slouchy ass outfit, but you go out and like a hiking trip across the Scottish Highlands, and you are walking down a path backpacking, and you're approached by a woman who looks like this inexplicably. She provides no explanation for why she's dressed in like 1850s Victorian clothing. You would get one shot by her. Even a single affectation, a charm, a flirt, even a look from her, and you would fall to your knees. Don't pretend otherwise. Of course you would. I'm gay, but yes. Well, you understand the argument. Think about where you are, Vaush. People here would get one-shotted by a cashier at McDonald's. Dude, people will be like, oh my god, I went to a fucking KFC and the cashier had such pretty eyeliner. It was a pretty girl. And you'll think about her for the next 5 years. You're telling me a woman dressed like this wouldn't ruin your fucking life just looking at her? Come on. A woman went viral just the other day on Twitter for wearing an outfit of comparable constructive quality. I showed it yesterday. Look at this. 131,000 likes for an outfit that would have been, with all respect to this woman, fairly conventional not that long ago. Like, this is, it's a waist jacket and a tie and a pleated skirt. She looks lovely. No insult intended to this woman who looks lovely. But this would have been a fairly ordinary outfit on a woman just 100 or so years ago. Like, it would not have been uncommon to see women dressed like this. But now everyone's glazing the fuck out of it. Why? Because we dress worse now on average. We simply invest less time and money in our clothing than we used to. That's it. It's a math problem. The perceived social value of the outfit is in part a derivation of how much effort and thought is put into its construction, and over time we have preferred cheaper construction and less effort put into the outfits. This is a byproduct of that. Same as how like an old fancy plate might have been like this beautiful hand-painted thing that you keep from generation to generation, but nowadays people go buy plates from bulk at Target. Like, it is cheaper, it is more efficient, but you have lost the art. No one's putting that shit in a museum. Why do you think this is an increase in cultural mediocrity overall? It's a consequence of the Industrial Revolution. We produced the ability to make a bunch of necessary things almost like borderline for free, frankly, compared to how expensive it used to be to produce them, from clothing to cutlery to whatever else. And as a consequence, they became available to everyone. And when they became available to everyone, they became seen as less and less of a status symbol. Same thing happened to cars. for a certain time, cars were made beautifully and were made with luxury in mind. Now, even expensive cars often look like shit. Like, you can pay $70,000 for a modern truck, and you get in, and it's like blocky. Everything is computer bullshit. You have to pay really, really top-end prices to get something that's made to be beautiful, like a work of art. You know? Unfortunately, this is the consequence of building a world where the value of aesthetic presentation is tied to its exclusivity. In my opinion, in a less consumerist world, people would put a lot more effort into their presentations because there wouldn't be a widespread cultural devaluation of things that become accessible to the proletariat. The charm of an outfit like this is maintained even if it's no longer just the professional managerial class that can afford to dress in it. This is one of the reasons, by the way, why some forms of contemporary streetwear look excellent today, because they are born from an aesthetic that was not ever valued for its social exclusivity. Like, when you see people dressed in really high-end streetwear, or you see whatever, like, Dochi's wearing these days, to pull an example, the value of those outfits was never tied to the fact that only the wealthy people could access it. Therefore, it maintains to a large extent its beauty and its perceived social value, even outside the exclusivity that it might have been perceived to have. Though nowadays, of course, even streetwear has been like super commercialized, so you know. No, this is so boring. Dog, you can literally like watch something else. You're not being changed. It's not fucking Clockwork Orange. I never got that. Like, oh, he's talking about a thing. You can just leave. Like, you can come back later, man. It's hours of content every day. We do this for basically everything nowadays. Architecture used to be very beautiful. Now the stuff we throw up looks cheap and ugly. Even like Parisian blocks that were built back in the 1800s to be filled with working class people were more beautiful than high-end apartment blocks built today. Everything is uglier now. Everything sucks. Like, there are apartment blocks like this all over Europe that were built to be housed by poor people. But they were built like this because they were considered a vital aesthetic component of the city. And the reason why that was valued was because everyone, even the wealthy, would walk down the streets of that city. But nowadays, everyone just drives in a bubble from place to place. Which means that no one really fucking cares how the city looks, only the venue that you get to once you step outside of the car. Which means that there's no longer an investment in the beauty of a city outside of the venue you're getting to. And all the wealthy people live in fucking Beverly Hills or whatever, right? They live in the hills. So the hills themselves, the estates are beautiful, but then you go, you know, down the city and it's disgusting and wretched and full of urban rot. That's so sad. Yeah, it is. Man, like modernism? We're not complaining about modernism. Modern architecture isn't ugly because of modernism. If anything, modernism was the last gasp of beauty in architecture. Like, ain't no one complaining about Frank Lloyd Wright. These buildings weren't for poor people. Middle-class people lived in the shit apartments. These houses, the poor live in barrack housing. I disagree. If you scale the relative level of wealth from Paris back in the mid-1800s to today, these apartments would be filled with the equivalent of modern-day poor people. Just urban poor. Not like destitute poor. But these were like regular people in a lot of cases. You know what I mean? I'm not saying like that there weren't worse places for the very, very poor, but a lot of regular people lived in buildings like this. But now even relatively upper middle class people are being pushed into like quick built new apartments that look like shit, even in like wealthy areas. You know what I mean? Yeah, if you worked in Paris, you had to live in Paris. You couldn't drive from the suburbs outside of Paris. So if poor people worked in Paris, they lived in Paris, you know? The car really did ruin everything. God, I'm making myself, like, depressed. Also, even if you look up Parisian barracks housing, guess what? It's nicer than what we deal with today. These were the actual poor people houses. Like, barracks housing. And look at that. Paved stone walkways outside and a garden that you overlook. Like, these were the slums, man. And even this architecturally looks better. And this was as bad as it got. Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. But you can look up what tenement housing looked like in the late 19th century. I mean, this is a contemporary refurbishment. Oh my God. Photos of tenement housing, New York City. Outside. I want the outside. I know the inside looked like literal fucking plague ass. I'm talking about, like, building our cities beautifully. Dude, I feel like even looking at, like, the Lower East Side in the turn of the century, this shit is still objectively nicer looking than the apartments that we put up today. Like, this looks like poverty, but it still looks better because they were like, I don't know, it's still New York City. Maybe we should, like, fucking not... Like, we make plastic boxes now. This conveys a weight. This conveys a weight, you know? Nowadays, everything's the same 5/1 bullshit. It's this, everything looks the same. These are luxury apartments in Florida. This is what every new apartment development looks like. It looks awful, but it's everything. And these are for modern wealthy people. Like, upper middle class people live here. This is where the fucking Puerto Ricans lived. This is not an argument of nostalgia. It is simply that it used to be a greater percentage of our wealth and labor went into things than it does now. Now, a majority of society's wealth just sits in dragons' vaults doing nothing. But it used to be we spent more. There was more velocity of wealth being spent on the labor of workers and architects and stonemasons and tailors and blah-de-blah-de-blah. It's just a math problem. A greater percentage of the GDP flowed into the wages of those people. And now they don't, and this is what we get. Here's your wealth. Oh, you made it. You're wealthy now. You get to live here. I'm not saying things were better back then. I'm just saying that, again, like, it's just a product of how much money you spend. Remember that chart we looked at earlier, percentage of GDP on wages versus market growth? It's literally that, except you have to imagine those lines continuing back. You have to imagine those lines continuing back to the 1800s. Let me find it. Yeah, this one. On average, the more of the GDP goes into total wages, the more you are paying workers to do work. Everything that is art, everything that is beautiful in the world is made by a worker. Every house, every item of clothing, every bit of ceramic dishware, every pot, every cup, every bit of silverware, all of it is a byproduct of work. Work is done, and for work, people are paid wages. So the more of your economy goes into the market as opposed to into the wages, that's what you get. Every single American city has examples of beautiful architecture being destroyed and replaced with shit. Here's my city's courthouse before and after. Jesus fuck. It's like a fucking humiliation ritual, man. Fresno County Courthouse. They hate you. It's like they're the planners and the designers actually fucking despise you. Isn't it interesting how, without breaking the flow of the topic, we've segued from male-made outfits into the modern wage crisis and the way it impacts the beauty in our lives? This is, I unironically think this is a kind of, it is a kind of intersectionality of dialectical materialism. You realize, once you really see the fucking code in the Matrix, you realize how connected everything is. The reason why clothes used to be better tailored is the same reason why nowadays the streets aren't clean. It's always the same, because fundamentally it always comes back to the dialectical material engagement between the working class and the bourgeoisie, where that wealth goes and how it's used. Everything ties back to that relationship. I would love to see some economist make a mock-up of this graph, except extended back to the beginning of the US stock market. Because I'd be willing to bet, and I'm almost certain that this would be the case, that if you drew this back to like 1900, you would see in an era where we still built great things, great bridges and stone buildings and beautiful masonry, and had a talent for production. I bet you would see this difference much more starkly, because over only a roughly 50-year time span, the share of wages has gone down by a quarter, and the market share has gone up by that same quarter, coincidentally. So over 100 years? Over 150? Man, this one went long. I regret nothing. I think it is very civilizationally ruinous that whenever we see what might have been considered an ordinary outfit from 100 or so years ago, everyone basically agrees it looks better than what we wear today. And when everyone sees a building made around 100 years ago, everyone agrees that it looks better than what they made today. And when you go and you look at like we do this with you go look at cars from the 1950s, and basically everyone agrees they look better than the cars today. I think it's genuinely like a societal humiliation ritual where we are all just getting conditioned to accept mediocrity. And this is not nostalgia, and I think the reason for that is because it's not a subjective preference for older aesthetic styles, but rather an appreciation for the fact that we literally just put more effort in. Not in an abstract way, in a material, like literally by the numbers, more effort was put in, Like, it's not nostalgia to look at a project from 100 years ago that cost more and took more labor to produce and go, that was better than a thing today that cost no effort at all to produce, Can you imagine how much more beautiful the world would be? Can you imagine how good modern contemporary outfits would look like? How good they would look if we had the same attitude towards beauty that we did then? Like how fucking crisp the streetwear would look? I feel like people would look like runway models, man. The cars in those days were just metal coffins. Well, yeah, they didn't work as well as modern cars, but I'm talking about beauty. Beauty matters. And you could make modern cars look beautiful, like a Mustang from the 60s. There is literally nothing except a tiny reduction in gas mileage that you would get from lowered aerodynamic efficiency. You could just build a 60s Mustang today. You literally could. You could make that. Beauty is often at odds with usability. I disagree. I disagree. I think that beauty, that form follows function, and that beauty is often just ornamentation on functional principles. A beautiful outfit must be an outfit that is appropriate to the situation, which is why modern suits often look terrible, because they're poorly fitting. They strain. They look awful and uncomfortable and awkward. But is it efficient? It shouldn't have to be. Beauty is the opposite of efficiency in a lot of cases. You produce the form, but then you ornament. God, we used to, even like old tribes, like humans in tribes, like before we even had agriculture, put effort into making things beautiful. These are people who, like, they didn't even know when they would next get to eat meat or like get berries or whatever, and they would put extra time and effort into weaving beautiful baskets. It's an innate part of what we are. The drive to make everything as efficient as possible is anti-human. You should make things efficient to the extent that you can serve the interests of people, but we've already made that. You can buy a 10 stack of plates from Target for like $10 probably or something. We've already met the need. Now let's focus on making things beautiful. But we can't, because there's no money and there's no fucking labor and there's no knowledge. Generalizing the segment, I don't understand why you are all so spiritually deprived. That it's crazy to me that you could hear what I just said and your comment in YouTube chat is generalizing, the segment. I am offended. I don't think you were trying to trigger me, because I rarely look at YouTube chat, but I genuinely think you have less of a soul than I do. I really mean it. I'm not exaggerating. I think that you are so worn out by the cynicism of the day that you don't believe that there is a spiritual or aesthetic deprivation of the modern era. You live in slop and you have come to expect it, and anyone who hopes or yearns for more, you think them like fancifully minded. You think I'm touched in the head. You think it's crazy. You think it's as simple as me looking at this and I'm like, well, I like this Twitter outfit, so the West has fallen or something. You're not engaging with the argument because it's easier to boil what I'm saying down into a series of trite, thought-terminating cliches that you can just attribute to a particular set of aesthetic preferences on my part, as opposed to it being a demonstrable, empirical, and by the way, Marxist read on the relationship between labor and capital. All right, well, anyway. These are my favorite segments of yours. Yeah, it's just, it does frustrate me a little bit that people are like, all right, Unc, I'm tired of hearing about the nature of life and beauty and the way in which we've been deprived of beauty by the capital class. Go back to talking about, like, the news or something. Like, that does depress me a little bit. You know what I mean? I know it's not nostalgia because I would love to see that kind of effort put into, like, modern streetwear outfits. You know what I mean? It's not everyone should look like the 1950s or whatever. It's that the world should have as much effort put into it as it did back then, because it doesn't, and that's mathematically provable. All right. I've depressed myself somewhat. All right, I love you all very much. I'm going to go. I'm going to be here tomorrow. You know the deal. I'm going to head out. Peace.